You know, when we think of kings and queens, we picture these epic, larger-than-life figures, right? Their stories are supposed to be all about glory and power. But here's the thing. History has a wickedly dark sense of humor, and it proves that even the most powerful people can have the most absurd, embarrassing, and, well, just plain ridiculous endings. So today, we're going to pull back that velvet curtain and look at some of royalty's most spectacular fails.
So just think about it for a second. What's the one thing that really truly connects a monarch sitting on a golden throne to, well, to you and me? Is it ambition? Love? Some divine right to rule? Nope. It's actually something way more universal and a whole lot more embarrassing.
That's right. The great equalizer, it turns out, is the very real potential for a profoundly clumsy and just super embarrassing final chapter. And believe me, royal history is packed with some of the best examples you'll ever find. So let's kick things off with a category I like to call death by misadventure. This is for all those monarchs whose biggest threat wasn't some invading army or a sneaky political rival. No, their biggest enemy was just simple fatal clumsiness. First up, meet King Louis III. This guy becomes king at just 16 years old and almost immediately scores this huge victory against the Vikings. It was so epic, they wrote a poem about it. He was basically the hero of the Frankish kingdoms. So you're thinking, this guy's invincible, right? Well, you'd be very, very wrong. And here's where it all goes wrong. I mean, spectacularly wrong. Just a year after his big victory, Louis sees a young woman and decides to chase her on his horse as a joke. She runs into her father's house to get away from him, and the king gallops right after her, so focused on the chase that he totally misses the low stone doorway. He smacks his head so hard that he fractures his skull and dies. A celebrated Viking slayer taken out by bad architecture. You just can't make this stuff up. All right, so from a king who couldn't see a doorway right in front of him, let's turn to another one whose fatal mistake was also about, well, vision. This is King Henry II of France. Now, Henry was a big deal. He's the guy who finally ended the Italian Wars, this brutal 65-year conflict. And to celebrate, of course, he threw a massive party. As part of the celebration, Henry, who loved jousting, decided to get in on the action himself. During one run, his opponent's lance hits his helmet and shatters, which, is totally normal. That's what's supposed to happen. But a big chunk of wood, a splinter, broke off, shot right through the king's visor and went directly into his eyeball. The best surgeons in the kingdom rushed to help, but they just couldn't fix the wound. 10 agonizing days later, he died from a massive infection. A party to celebrate peace ended in a fatal and totally preventable accident. Okay, if you thought those were bad, our next story, it takes the word undignified to a completely new level. We're talking about a king whose end was so bizarre, so out there, it's just, you won't believe this one.
Okay, let's talk about King Edmund. He was the King of England for only about 7 months, way back in the year 1016. And his entire reign was basically one long, fierce war against Danish Viking invaders, who were led by this formidable guy, King Canute.
Edmund fought back so fiercely against the Danes that he earned the nickname Ironside. I mean, with a name like Ironside, you're picturing a total powerhouse, right? A guy who's basically indestructible. This was not a man you'd expect to go down easily. Eventually, though, Edmund was defeated and forced to sign a treaty with Canute. They split England between them, but with a pretty grim condition. Whichever one of them died first, the other would inherit the whole kingdom. So yeah, that kind of set the stage for a different kind of battle. One where Edmund was at his most vulnerable. That's right. The mighty warrior king they called Ironside met his final enemy in the one place any king is truly, utterly defenseless.
So get this, according to the story, just a month after the treaty was signed, an assassin who was loyal to Canute hid in the cesspit underneath the royal toilet and just waited. When King Edmund came in to do his business, the assassin stabbed him from below. Edmund died, and just like that, King Canute got all of England. Ironside, indeed.
Okay, so far, the threats have all been, well, external. Doorways, splinters, assassins in the loo. But sometimes, the biggest dangers come from the very things that are supposed to bring you comfort or even cure you. These next stories are all about when the solution was way, way worse than the problem.
So in these next two cases, we've got kings who are dealing with some really tough stuff, profound sadness and a debilitating illness. But their attempts to find just a little bit of relief? Yeah, that's what led them straight to their doom.
First up, King Henry I of England. After his only son and heir died in a horrible shipwreck, Henry spiraled into a deep, dark depression. The only thing that brought him any comfort was his absolute favorite food, this slimy, jawless fish called a lamprey. His doctor was literally begging him, "Your Majesty, please, lay off the lampreys." But in his grief, the king just didn't listen. In 1135, he ate a massive meal of them, got a terrible case of food poisoning, and died a week later. A powerful king completely undone by his comfort food. And then we have a guy whose nickname tells you everything you need to know, Charles II of Navarre, aka Charles the Bad. This man spent his entire life scheming, backstabbing, and betraying pretty much everyone to get more power. But his ending? Well, it was a truly bizarre form of karma.
See, in his old age, Charles the Bad got so sick he couldn't even move. His doctor came up with, well, one of the wildest treatments I've ever heard of. He prescribed wrapping the king from head to toe in linen sheets that had been soaked in brandy. So one night, the maid is sewing him into his little alcohol cocoon, and she can't find her scissors to snip the last thread. In a truly disastrous move, she thinks, oh, I'll just use this candle to burn the thread off. The result was as fast as it was predictable. King Charles the Bad was instantly flambéed in his own bed.
So, wow, after all that, the doorways, the splinters, the toilet incidents, what's the big takeaway here? Are these just a bunch of funny, morbid stories? Or is there something more we can learn from all this?
I think what it all really shows is that all the power in the world doesn't make you immune to stupidity or clumsiness or just really, really bad luck. These were people who could be taken down by a doorway, a wood splinter, a bad meal, or a truly terrible medical idea. The line between being remembered as Ironside the warrior and the king who died on the toilet is terrifyingly thin.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question, doesn't it? We all spend our lives trying to build our own legacies, but these stories are a crazy reminder that sometimes what history remembers isn't our greatest triumphs, but our most profoundly human and sometimes absolutely ridiculous final moments. It really makes you think, right?